Hello, everybody. Holly here with Reality Sandwich, back for another episode of Share Your Experience. Today, I'm joined by Elle, who is going to be giving us some interesting insights on her experiences with Kanna and MDMA, how they are different, how they are similar, and what it's like working with these two medicines. Thank you for joining me today, Elle. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So I'm Elle, and a little bit about myself. So I'm currently going to college for my medicinal plant sciences major, which is kind of like a heavily ethnobotany based, with like a little bit of chemistry kind of thrown in there. Um, my main focus right now is cannabis, solely because it's legal and easy to work with. Um, Although my passion is like psychedelics and pathogens.
Very cool. That's a fascinating way to go about getting a college degree. I very much love it. I'm a little jealous, I gotta say.
Thank you.
But I'm excited to learn a little bit more from you today. So let's get in the time machine and take it way back to the first time you became interested in psychedelics, or how you became aware of what psychedelics and plant medicines are. Like, when did this enter your universe?
Are we talking about like MDMA and Kanna specifically, or just psychedelics in general?
I think just psychedelics in general. Like, how'd the awareness begin or the interest begin?
Probably that would be around like late 2019, and like that was around the time that I was kind of like coming to terms of like my gender identity, and like realizing that I wanted to like tell my friends and family and come out. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And so my friend was like, hey, I have some acid. Do you want to have a trip? And I'm like, sure. At this point, like, I had maybe smoked weed once or twice. Like, so I was very unexperienced. And I was like, sure, this sounds like a good starting point.
Let's jump right in.
And honestly, it was one of the best experiences of my life. And I ended up staying up until like, I think like 2, 3 in the morning.
So, I'm curious how LSD helped you maybe come out of your shell in a way that you felt comfortable talking to your friends and family about your gender identity. Like, what was the like catalyst in that experience that gave you either the courage or the insight or the clarity?
I don't really know if there was any specific moment, but like, I just know that after my trip, I had that kind of clarity of like, what's the worst that could possibly happen? And I think part of it was because there was a couple moments in my trip that were fairly not like traumatizing or anything, but like they were fairly scary and difficult to get through. But like at the end of the day, I was able to get through it, and I was like, oh, okay, so like if I can get through that, then how bad can this really end?
Right, right. I hear that a lot when I talk with people about LSD, and in my own personal experiences too. One of the big messages that seems to come through that medicine is that stop taking everything so seriously, right? Like, everything's a matter of life and death because we're all going to die, and it's not that big of a deal. Like, just
Exactly.
relax.
It almost felt like there was like a big like joke that the universe was telling, and that when I took
Yeah.
acid, like I finally got the punchline, and I'm like, oh, I can just
Yeah.
kind of like relax and laugh, and like this is fun.
Right, right. Oh, that's awesome. I love it. That's my favorite substance, so it's always my favorite to hear about people's LSD experiences. But what I'm very interested in hearing a little more about is this relation between Kana and MDMA. So I've dabbled with Kana a little bit, not in large doses though, like tinctures or like in a chew or like an oral spray, but nothing in like what I would consider, I suppose, like a ceremonial dose or looking to have that almost like high. I've definitely experienced MDMA in pretty significant doses, and I'm aware of both its like heart opening and psychedelic effects. So, tell me a little bit about how these two compare and how you've personally experienced the similarities between these substances.
So I would say that like if you're fairly familiar with how they both feel, like there's definitely more of like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a punchier, like almost like more forceful feeling with MDMA. Like it's definitely still a very like positive and enjoyable experience, but like it feels more like intense and like you don't really have as much of a choice. Whereas with Kana, it feels kind of like more open. Like I don't know if like organic makes sense as a feeling, but like it definitely has more of like a natural planty vibe. And like
Okay.
although
No, that makes sense.
I would say that like a large dose, especially like I usually dabble with the stuff at like Kanna Extract Company and like the kind of like extracted powder, and it feels honestly fairly similar to like 100 milligrams of Prozac, but like a large dose of
Okay. Okay.
antidepressants with maybe like
So tell me like what is like a dose? I'm familiar with Kana extracts. I've tried their products as well. I like their capsules. Their dailies are really
their
great.
dailies are really good.
So yeah, I like those a lot. So what's like a typical dose that you take and tell me like what the physical experience of Kana is like?
I usually do about 10 milligrams. I like honestly, this is probably not the best practice, but I don't really weigh my doses. I just use the little orange scoopy thing that they give us. um, but I believe it's about 10 milligrams roughly, and I usually insulfilate that, and it feels like initially there's like kind of like a buzzy, rushy sensation, very similar to MDMA, and then it kind of like mellows out into like it's not exactly the same as like an afterglow if you get like afterglow of like psychedelics or like MDMA or things like that, but like it's comparable.
So who do you think can benefit most from a substance like Kana?
Honestly, I would say that it would benefit people largely in the same way that MDMA would benefit people. Like if you're struggling with like post traumatic stress disorder, um, if you're struggling with like treatment resistant depression, um, things along those lines. Although I will admit that I am not a doctor, so like this is not like
Of course not. Yes. This is our personal opinion here,
exactly.
folks. Just personal experience only, not medical advice. Okay. Okay. Um, so I'd love to hear a little bit more then about your personal experiences with MDMA and dosage and set and setting and what that's been like in your life.
So I've had a few different experiences of MDMA. Um, they've ranged from pseudo clinical all the way to like rave settings and pretty much everything in between. I've done it a few times on its own. I think it shines particularly when it's mixed, like it kind of like psychedelic tofu almost. Like I very much enjoy it. Like I find MDMA and mushrooms to be a very enjoyable experience,
Mm.
especially like if you want to work through something but don't necessarily think you can handle all of the weight of the mushrooms. The MDMA almost makes it feel kind of like lighter, if that makes sense.
That's interesting. Yeah, mushrooms are so earthy and like I always describe them as like being very inward as opposed to like an LSD or MDMA, which is very outward.
Yeah,
But I've never paired the two, so that's interesting. Do you feel that like those two substances combined are very visual, or is it more of a body and
for
mental experience?
mushrooms and MDMA, it's more of a body and mental experience. Although I have done like a candy flip, which is like acid and MDMA, and that was very, very visual. Like
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that combination myself. For music, that's like
That is
if you want to go dancing, absolutely, absolutely. Okay. So MDMA and Kanna both work as I always just say kind of heart opener, right? Like
yeah.
a lot of times you hear people call Kanna nature's MDMA, which is fantastic. In your studies, like are we seeing very similar physical effects? Like is there research showing that Kanna can have the same type of therapeutic benefits as MDMA? And the reason I'm asking is because Kanna is widely available, right? It's widely available, but we don't talk about it very often. I would love to turn people on to Kanna that maybe are interested in trying something for treatment resistant depression or in other therapeutic settings, but can't access MDMA. So,
The one thing
do you think that go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The one thing that I will say is that I think the main difference between them is that Kana acts on the I believe it's the PED4 receptor in the brain, and that will heavily influence things like appetite suppression, and there's a few different mood type related things that can happen when that receptor is activated. Um, Other than that, it's fairly standard with the I believe it's the 5-HT2A receptor, like with traditional serotonergic psychedelics. Um, and I believe it also affects dopamine, but not as much as MDMA. Like, and I feel like that's definitely like one of the other differences I feel is that I don't feel as like energized or as like rush, like it doesn't have that like amphetamine punch that MDMA usually has.
Right. Sometimes MDMA can almost be speedy,
Yeah,
um, in a way. Which reminder, everybody, always test your substances.
true.
Okay, across the board, get a test kit always, no matter what. But my little disclaimer there.
I
But
believe it's the
okay, yeah,
mech reagent that tests it for MDMA. I think it's a black result is what people are looking for usually.
got it. Okay, okay. Um, So, have you ever taken like very large doses of Kanna? I'm kind of curious if in large quantities it does have any kind of like a psychedelic effect other than just the euphoria.
The largest dose that I've done is about 30 milligrams, and I like did about 3 scoops and made a little line, and then that was it was fairly intense compared to 10 milligrams. It was fairly mild compared to MDMA. Like, I wouldn't necessarily call it psychedelic. I would call it entactogenic. Like, there was a very present body high that kind of made me feel like tingly and bubbly all over. And then after that, it kind of mellowed out into just almost like a generic weed high. Like, but like I can also see how like it definitely helps when you're trying to like work through and process things. Like I've noticed that if I feel like kind of angry or pissed off at something, if I do a small bump of Kana, it kind of mellows out that anger and I'm like, "Oh, why am I really angry right now? Like I don't need this."
Okay. Which, right, that's another thing that we would talk about with MDMA, right? Like in just generally processing emotions and being able to come to a point of like, okay, like I can be at peace with this or I can digest this better, right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. I like that. I like that. I really like that. So I'm curious, like, do you know a little bit more about the history of Kana? Have you learned anything about that in your studies? Because I know that this is an ancient plant, but I'm curious how exactly, like, where did we get where we are now with Kana? Has it always been used in this manner?
I know that I believe it's the San and the Khoi tribes of South Africa are kind of where Kana really originated. Um,
Hmm.
Other than that, I'm not really sure how it kind of made the jump from like traditional kind of tribal medicine to like new party supplement.
As substances tend to do from time to time. Yeah. Everything's got a recreational and medicinal value, right? If you think about it in that way. Even recreational use, I think, can be medicinal in certain ways. Like even just talking about like dancing, right? Like taking a substance and hitting a dance floor, that's therapy right there, let me tell you.
100%. Like,
Absolutely.
honestly, I think, like, even if it's not medicinal, like having a mental health day where you can just turn your brain off, and like if you need a day to just get zonked and feel yourself or whatever, like that's just as important as like going to therapy or like other self-care activities.
Right, right. Or and you know, it's not always feasible to like head to the jungle in Peru and spend a weekend taking ayahuasca. But you might be able to have a dance party in your living room and feel pretty damn good the next day.
Exactly.
So, okay, so I know that like going back a little bit to this LSD experience in 2019 and this kind of journey you've been on since, how has working with Kanna and MDMA continued to shape maybe your confidence in your gender identity or your trajectory into this new version of yourself, this true version of yourself? Have those plants also been beneficial in that way?
Definitely. Like I think they've kind of helped me come to realize that like when I first came out, I felt very heavily like there was a type of person that I was supposed to be like when I came out as trans, and like there were certain things that were expected of me, like by society, by my friends, by my family, and as I experimented with these substances more, I've come to realize that like most of people's expectations are kind of bullshit. Like honestly, like as long as you're not hurting other people or yourself, like there's really not much that people can force you to do. And that was kind of the big takeaway from these substances that I've gotten. And it's been very helpful to kind of like take a step back and realize like, oh, like I don't know why I was letting like these thoughts control my life for so long.
I like that because, you know, you're not alone in this. There have to be so many people worldwide that have had similar experiences here. And also, I would imagine that if we're able to spread awareness or offer, especially something like Kana, which you can buy online from trusted parties, if you do a little bit of research, um, the potential to help others, you know, maybe open up more to the truth of who they are and be more comfortable in sharing that with the world. Like that's a powerful plant right there. A very powerful plant. All right. Well, I love this. So tell me, you know, what do you think the future of psychedelic legality looks like? Like what do you envision for our future?
That is honestly kind of a tough one because I, in my heart, I want to see it going on the same lines as like medical marijuana, where like state by state they kind of can legalize it if they so choose. And at this point, I think there's like what 10, 15 states that don't have it.
Yeah, if even that. Yeah.
But like, and I can definitely as as far as like like I can see like psilocybin mushrooms becoming like kind of on that path, and I think they already pretty much are.
They're on the
Um,
way. In states like Oregon and many cities that have decriminalized, yeah, along the way. I
definitely.
like to think that we'll have, you know, I certainly don't necessarily think we should have like open dispensaries and you can go pick up like a 10 strip of LSD, but I do hope that um that it becomes more affordable, more accessible and more well researched so that we're able to offer things like MDMA therapy as a part of all therapeutic settings for those that are prepared. And yeah, that maybe more people get curious about things like Kanna and start experiencing this for themselves in their daily lives. Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Um, well, one last question for you then, Al. For anybody that's curious about trying either Kanna or MDMA, where do you recommend they start, and what advice do you have for someone that's new to both of these substances?
Hmm. Well, for MDMA, make sure you test your stuff. Like 100% hands down, like don't take it if you don't know what it is. There's so many people will be late like will like put shit in your product that you don't know, like fentanyl, like trank is another one that's been big over in like Philadelphia area. Um but yeah, make sure your products are what you think they are. As far as and other than that, start low and go slow because you can always take more substances later, but you can never untake your substances.
Very important part. Yeah. Very important piece. And I always like to say too, be with good people and, stay safe.
100.
Only experiment with people that you love and trust.
Exactly.
Awesome.
One of the funniest jokes that I've ever heard was if you don't feel comfortable crapping your pants around someone, you probably shouldn't do psychedelics around them.
That's awesome. And valid, very valid. It's very you get really vulnerable on psychedelics. It's super valid.
Exactly.
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much for sharing today, Elle. I really appreciate your honesty and your vulnerability and sharing a piece of your story.
Thank you for having me on today.